15th, 1986. And I'm pretty sure I was watching it on TV when it happened. It was the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, and Roger Clemens was the American League starting pitcher. And he was the best pitcher in the American League. He had the fastest fastball in the American League. But back in those days, the National League didn't have what they called a designated hitter, which would hit for the pitcher. And so, in the second inning, Roger Clemens, who was from the American League where the pitchers never hit, his spot came up in the order, and they did not hit for him. So Roger Clemens had to hit in the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. Now, Roger Clemens probably had not picked up a bat since high school, but there he was in the second inning, and he was coming up against Dwight Gooden, the best pitcher of the National League, with, yes, the fastest fastball in the National League. And here's what happened. The first pitch came in, and it came in so fast. And Roger Clemens just walked and just looked at it awkwardly, strike one. Next pitch comes in, and Roger Clemens says, what the heck? I'm swinging. And he missed terribly. 0-2. Third pitch comes in. Roger Clemens swings and doesn't even come remotely close to hitting it. Strikes him out. And he looked awful doing it. But before he walked away from the plate, now Roger Clemens was, I think it was in his second or third year, he looks back at Gary Carter and Bruce Fleming, who was the umpire at the time, and he asks them, is that what my fastball looks like? And they said, oh yeah, that is what your fastball looks like. That moment changed Roger Clemens, because all of a sudden he realized what his fastball looks like from the other end of the diamond. He realized what his fastball looks like from the batter's box, and he realized how unhittable it was. And from that moment, he goes back to that moment and realized that was a moment where he got confidence in what he brought. And from there on, he pitched with greater courage, assertiveness, confidence. He threw that fastball not afraid at all. It changed his game. Eventually, he became the pitcher who struck out had the third most strikeouts in all of Major League Baseball. Today, we want to talk about your spiritual confidence. We want to talk about your spiritual confidence to show up in moments that God has called you to show up in. We're in a series called Love Shows Up. We are taking a really close study through the passages of a letter called 1 John. And John was a disciple of Jesus. He was one of the youngest disciples of Jesus. And all of the disciples had likely died when he had written this letter, somewhere between 40 and 50 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus. He was on, the Apostle John at this point was on Social Security, living outside of the city of Ephesus, probably spending most of his time playing pickleball. Anyway, but he made some time to write a letter to the believers who in that time were dealing with sort of a theological crisis at the time, and he had to address this particular crisis. And a couple of things that comes up in the letter is the call to actively love God and to actively love your spiritual family, to show up in the moments that matter, to love when love looks messy, to love when love looks hard, to love not just the people who are closest to you, not to love just in the situations that serve you best, to love when it's difficult. And there's a particular idea that is having a destructive impact on the church that he's going to address. And so we're about halfway through this letter, and I'm going to read a passage, and I promise you this in the passage. There's going to be some phrases in this passage that will offend the Western ear. And so, if you just got brought here, you never go to church, and church is kind of a new thing, this might sound a little bit black and white, maybe even sound a little bit harsh, okay? but bear with me. I think I might be able to explain where it's all coming from. So here we are in 1 John. We're going to read from the end of chapter 2 through verse 10 of chapter 3. If you have a Bible on your phone or in your hand, you can read that with me, or you can look at the screens. And now, dear children, continue in him so that when he appears, we may be, what we talk about, confident and unashamed before him at his coming. If you know that he is righteous, you know that everyone who does what is right has been born of him. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been made known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. All who have this hope in him purify themselves just as he is pure. Everyone who sins breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness. But you know that he appeared so that he may take away our sins, and in him there is no sin. No one who lives in him keeps on sinning. No one who continues to sin has either seen him or known him. Dear children, do not let anyone lead you astray. The one who does what is right is righteous, just as he is righteous. The one who does what is sinful is of the devil, because the devil has been sinning from the beginning. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the devil's work. No one who is born of God will continue to sin, because God's sin remains in them. They cannot go on sinning because they have been born of God. This is how we know who the children of God are and who the children of the devil are. Anyone who does not do what is right is not God's child, nor is anyone who does not love their brother and sister. All right, so what's it going to look like for us to be confident and not ashamed when it comes to our faith? The challenge that the Apostle John was addressing was a challenge from teachers known as the Gnostics. And the Gnostics they liked sort of like the Christian cultural elements of it, but they're like, the whole Jesus thing, you don't really need Jesus. What you really need is a really good idea. You really need a good idea to rally around, or you need some secret knowledge, right? And those who had the knowledge, they got to be the insiders. And those who didn't have the knowledge, they were on the outside, right? You'll find this in cancel culture on the right and on the left, right? If you violate a certain political idea or you drift in that direction, people start bullying you and say there's something wrong. No. You have to. If you're not committing to this pre-packaged set of ideology with this party, if you don't buy into all of these things, you don't belong, right? And you get canceled, and the right does this, the left does this. You've got your prepackaged things. Here's the 15 to 17 things you need to commit to. If you don't commit to all 17 of these things, you get bullied on the way out. You get named. You get called out. This is the same kinds of things. The insiders have this kind of knowledge, and the outsiders don't have it, or the outsiders don't agree, right? And where you get your confidence when it comes to Gnosticism is not... your confidence is you're not like them. You're not an outsider, right? And so sometimes this can play itself out in culture war stuff. Sometimes it's just cool culture, right? And so maybe it's not I don't know the right knowledge. I know the right person. If I can be friends with this person, then I can feel like I'm on the inside, right? And as long as I'm on the inside, I know that I'm not on the outside. And so what happens in a situation like that is we get our confidence from being an insider, whether it's who I know or it's an insider, it's what I know, right? And in our world, sometimes it's like if I can know all the things, then I can be the insider. And then I can be okay, and I'm not one of them. Right? Or if I can know this person, and if this person will include me, right? Then I know I belong. I can be confident. I don't have to be ashamed. Why? Because I'm included with them, right? We can do this thing with social. We can do this socially. We can do this culturally. And what this was doing to the church, it was eliminating the need for Jesus. And it was no longer becoming a church. It was becoming sort of a club of belonging around ideas or certain kinds of people. And John says that is not going to work at all. He said, if you want to be confident, if you want to live with true spiritual power and confidence without shame, he's going to walk us through things. And I'm going to bring 4 things out of this specific passage. The first one is this: you really need to know who you are. You need to know who you are. And I'm going to hit this from a couple different angles. Several years ago, I think it was about 10 years ago, my father-in-law got our family in to visit the White House at Christmas. Now, my father-in-law and mother-in-law are pretty cool people. Like, back at, they have Washingtonian magazine, the top docs, top lawyers. They get themselves into that magazine. They're like cool people. They are like cool beltway people, right? And he knew somebody that did like some crown molding in the White House. I don't know, something like that. And so it was Christmas time, and we got to do a tour with some other folks. We literally went into the back door, and we got to walk around. And yes, they had the ropes and stuff like that, and they had the big guards that said, don't go across the ropes. But like, we got to see the Christmas trees and like that yellow room, whatever it is. We got to see all kinds of stuff. And most people don't get to do that. Why did we get to do that? Because we knew somebody, we got in. And that was awesome. You know what we didn't do, though, while we were there? We didn't go remotely near anybody who lives there, and nor did we access any of the power of which the White House represents. But we did get to kind of see it. We got access to it, which was really, really cool. Bookmark that for a moment. Some of you might know a guy named Tyler who attends our church. He's a coach down at Westchester University. Helped me coach the Delco Goats. We had a last moment with our basketball team at the end of our season. And he took the moment, and we wanted to meet with the players, and he asked them this question: who are you? Right? Not an easy question for a 15 to 17-year-old male to answer. But it's probably a good question for me to ask you. Who are you? How would you answer that question? Who are you? Underneath the question was a research project Tyler did while he was at Westchester University that somewhere around 40% or more student athletes will have a significant mental health crisis within 2 years of the ending of their athletic career. Rooted in his thesis, and there's an awful lot of research out there that suggests that when you're an athlete your entire life, and you go all the way into college playing sports, you build your identity around being an athlete. What happens when you're no longer an athlete? It becomes a personal existential crisis. Now let me come back to you and ask you once again, who are you? Are you a mom? How does that change when parents leave the home? You're still a mom, but it's different. Are you an executive? What does that look like when you are retired? Are you a good friend? What happens when your friend or friends move away? I got to go to the White House, and I knew someone. I got to see the Christmas trees. It was really, really great. But I could only go so far within the White House. You know who can go wherever they want within the White House? The president's son. You might have seen this photo before of JFK Jr. playing underneath the Resolute desk. The desk of the president, while the leader of the free world did his work. President's son could go in there and play and do what he wants. President's son could go wherever he wants. Why? Because he's the son of the leader of the free world. And what that means is that he has access. Chances are he did not walk and knock on the door and be really, really, really afraid and think he's going to get in trouble by going to the Oval Office. Chances are he just ran right in there, blew open the door, and walked in. There's a fun quote I came across of JFK Jr. Remembering these days. He said, "I can remember playing under the big wooden desk in his office. My mother didn't like us to chew gum, so we'd go into his office and he'd feed us gum under the desk." He had no problem asking the leader of the free world for a piece of gum. Why? Because he was a child. The disciple John understood what this meant for us. When you think about who you are, one of the things that's true of every single one of us is that we are a child. We are a child of someone. John takes it even further, saying, "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God." And that is what we are. We have access to the God of this world. We can ask him for a stick of gum. We can ask him for a lot more than that. He is already thinking about our needs. He understands our situation. He has compassion on us. He wants us near him. He wants to listen to us. He wants us to talk to him. He wants us to ask not just for a stick of gum, but for more than a stick of gum. Regardless of what might change on the outside of our lives, our careers, ideas, different kinds of transitions, if you know Christ, what will never change is that you are loved by God the Father. You have access to him from wherever you are. And when you recognize who you are, it also changes who we are becoming. He will continue on. The gospel writer or the writer of the letter John says this. He says, "Dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been made known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is." So what you know is that you're a child of God, and something is happening in your life where you are going to eventually be like him. Does that mean you're going to look like this guy? Maybe you might, in heaven, you might be able to get to wear a cool blue sash like that. And certainly in heaven, I certainly hope that finally I'll be able to grow a legit beard, right? But chances are we're not going to look like that guy, but we are going to look like his character. Love, joy, peace, patience will be established in us. But what John's trying to say is, like, you don't have to wait till then. All of the family attributes are available to us now by his Spirit. As the scriptures say, we have his seed in him. We have his very character. His DNA has been put into us, and we can nurture and experience what it means to know love, joy, peace, patience. It continues on as all those who have this hope purify themselves. Like when you have the hope to be more and more like Jesus, you end up having hope that you can try to be like Jesus. Our family recently picked up an additional car to meet our expanding transportation needs, all right? I memorized that sentence, all right? We had 5 drivers. We needed an additional car. And what was really cool about this car is whoever owned it before us did a really good job of keeping it neat and clean. And we had 4 different drivers. And like, man, for the first 2-3 weeks, before it got sent up to State College, it comes back today. We'll find out how it looks now. But for the first 2-3 weeks, we had 4 different drivers, and we were keeping that thing clean. Nobody left anything inside of it, man. We had this hope, like, man, it's a nice, fresh start with a clean car. We kept it so clean. That happened to me actually about 8 years ago when we needed to get a different car, and we came across our father-in-law had a car just sitting in his driveway. The transmission was shot, and he didn't really know what to do with it. I was like, well, all right, we'll take it off your hands. We got the transmission fixed, and at this point in time, I was driving the bougiest car I'd ever driven in my life. It was like the first Lincoln Aviator. It was awesome. If I could duplicate that chair and put it in my living room to watch TV from, I totally would. It was so comfortable. It was an awesome car. We loved that car. And man, and like, you know, when we first got it, I was like all over. I was like, everybody get your stuff out of the car. Don't leave anything in this car, right? We're going to keep it really, really, really neat. And then church planning happened, right? And so whenever you start, like when you plan a church, you need an SUV because there's stuff in your car all the time. You always have stuff in your car. We had our staff meetings at Wegmans Cafe. Like this is the kind of life you live when you're starting a church up, right? So that's what we were doing. And we had stuff in it all the time, but still things were going really, really well. Until it was that day, it was a morning I remember. I was coming out of the car and I was walking around the outside of the car and I noticed it was like a piece of paper sticking out from underneath the back gate of the car. I'm like, what is that? And I walked to him like, wait a second. That's not paper, that's like wet. And then I opened up the gate to find this. Yes, that's a spilled can of paint in the middle of it. Long story short, somebody I thought had closed it and closed it all the way. And I just put it in the back, and I put it back on a Sunday, and I just sort of like drove with it for about 5 days. So somewhere along the line, in those 5 days, that can of paint tipped over and just spilled and sat there. Just we can take a closer look. If you take a closer look, look at that gate. Look at the lock there. That lock, it's like, just think of something metal sitting in like sour, you know, like vegetable dip for days on end. All right, so, and it was one of those things like, how do you clean that up? I put trash bags out and I pulled out the hose and hosed this thing until I thought we were going to run out of water. We did our best, right? But eventually what ended up happening, you just sort of give up in one of these situations. We got the lock to work, but forever, the Aviator was this thing that had like little splashes of white paint everywhere that we couldn't get rid of. And it got to the point where you're like, you know, you kind of stopped trying. Right? And at this point, the bougiest car I ever drove became like the equivalent of like a work truck, right? And you're like, all right, well, hey, we need some mulch. All right, we'll just have them just dump the mulch in the back of the gate, right? I mean, you're just whatever, like, hey, look, does anybody else need trash picked up? Because we can just stick it in the back of here. And you just kind of stop trying, right? And I think that can happen with our faith, right? Because it's like we've made some mistakes, or we've drifted so far, and you're like, I don't know, can we really stop? Like, can I really get back, or can I really get any kind of momentum? And the promise of the gospel is that we have a fresh start. We have hope. You don't have to like prove yourself back into God's presence. Next week on Father's Day, every single one of us is like disappointed our father in some way, right? Well, you don't have to fix that before you call him on Father's Day. You don't have to fix all the things that you didn't do like he told you to do when you were 17. You don't have to fix that. He's not waiting for you to fix your life so you can call him. He just wants you to call him. He might not even want you to call him. But his love for you isn't based upon you fixing all those things, cleaning up all those things, getting all the little white splashes of paint that has piled up on your life that he might disapprove of. It's not about that. And certainly not that about your Heavenly Father. You have the hope that you're a child of God. And when that's the case, man, you have a fresh start. And what do? You keep going. And you continue to purify yourself. You want that life of Christ in your life. You try to build it into your life as much as possible. Why? Because it's good. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has ever conceived what God has prepared for those who believe. That is true for you. You can dream a better life than the life that God has already prepared for you, right? And when you have a hope like that, you live into it. For a lot of us, when we think about our spiritual lives, we think of it like I thought about the Aviator at the end. I'll just throw some mulch in, it doesn't really matter. No, it does. It really does matter. The third point is, because it matters, we need to stay on target with it. We need to stay on the path. You know who says it doesn't matter? The Gnostics said it didn't matter. One of the common things that would come out of Gnosticism is like they'd say, don't get too much wrapped around Jesus. It's really not about Jesus. It's like we've got like this, as long as you're kind of moral at the center. But like the rest of your life, what you do with your body doesn't matter. What you do with your money doesn't matter. And what the way you behave really doesn't matter. As long as you hold to these ideas and have this kind of knowledge, okay, then you're approved. As long as you're on the inside, you can do what you want with your behavior, right? Because you're on the inside here. And what John says is that is absolutely wrong. That's absolutely wrong. If you're a Christian and you don't love your spiritual family, he's not talking to your actual brother and sister, but they count as well. But if you can't love others, like you should question whether you're a Christian. If you're not motivated to love your spiritual family, like what is that? You can't be like that. Don't go around telling people you're a Christian and not act loving and kind and obsess about different things like this. You're going to say you're a Christian and exclude people? Like, what is that? He says, look, you can't say you're a Christian and not be loving. That's like being of the devil. There's no sense of being righteous and not wanting to live a righteous life. He says, those who are righteous are the ones who live righteously. And those who live unrighteously, yeah, that's kind of like of the devil. And what he's not saying you earn your way into the Oval Office, right? He says if you have access to God and cannot love your brother and sister, you need to actually rethink what is going on, because that doesn't add up at all. It doesn't make sense at all. The evidence that you are a Christian is your love for others. Gnostics will say it doesn't matter what you do with your body, whether you care about others, and what matters is if you think the right things. You can have the right theology and entirely miss it with who God is. C.S. Lewis famously speaks about this. He says, Christianity asserts that we are going to go on forever. Now, there are a great many things that wouldn't be worth bothering about. There are a great many things that wouldn't be worth bothering about it if I was only going to live 80 years or so. But I better bother about if I'm going to go on living forever. Perhaps my bad temper or my jealousy are getting worse, so gradually that the increase in my lifetime will not be very noticeable, but it might be absolutely hell in a million years. In fact, if Christianity is true, hell is precisely the correct technical term for it. Hell begins with a grumbling mood, always complaining, always blaming others, but you're still distinct from it. You may even criticize it in yourself and wish you could stop it, but there may come a day when you can no longer. There will be no you left to criticize the mood or to even enjoy it, but just the grumble itself going on and on forever like a machine. It's not a question of God sending us to hell. In each of us, there is something growing which will be hell unless it is nipped in the bud. Our inability to love another person has to be addressed. And he puts it in our face. If your certain knowledge or your inside status has you walk around naming them as the problem, you don't understand who Jesus is. If you think you're an us and there's a them that's the problem, you are missing out on who Christ is. And if you allow that to continue to burn and grumble, what does that look like over time? Now, C.S. Lewis is not giving a specific theological definition for hell, but he does but he and the gospel writer John comes to each and every single one of us that says a central part of the Christian life is that we struggle and we try to resist sin. It sounds almost so basic, but we do forget about it, that no matter how long you live on this life, there's never going to be a final elimination of sin in our lives. And so whether you're brand new to the faith or you've been in the faith 50 years, sin is going to continue to present itself in different kinds of forms. And to assume we are righteous because we've got a certain set of ideas or we're theologically accurate is really foolish. Now, the fourth thing is this. When it comes to sort of resisting sin or having this hope continue to purify us, to grow in our confidence and lack of shame when it comes to our faith, we need to trust in the way it works. And here's how it doesn't work. When it comes to resisting sin, spending all of your energy trying to not sin is not the way it works. The passage says this, that Jesus came to destroy the work of the devil. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the devil's work. No one who is born of God will continue to sin because God's seed remains in him. They cannot go on sinning because they've been born of God. Just in the most simple and specific way, I want to just give a real quick, simple summary of how you resist sin in your life, okay? Can you come up with a sin? Just nod. You can come up with a sin. All right. The way you're not going to overcome it is like white knuckling and try not to do it, right? What the scriptures teach us is that what Jesus has done, he has entered into your life and has given you a new birth, a new life. There's a new life inside you growing, right? Just think if you put bamboo in your garden several years ago, you'd have a lot of bamboo there, right? What Jesus has done has put something much more powerful than bamboo that's going to take up the soil and push the bamboo out over time, right? And so Jesus is the one that begins to address the sin in our life. He does it by putting a new life in us, right? And so what does that new plant, that new life need? It needs two things. It needs light and it needs food, right? And so if there's something broken in your life, you don't fight it, you don't resist it, you bring it into the light. You reveal it. John will say earlier in the passage, confess your sins to God. First thing you need to do with a sin is to name it. Like, hey, God, I know this is wrong. You name it in front of him. And if that doesn't stop it, you begin giving it more light. You talk to other people about it. You confess to other people about it. You defeat sin by bringing it into the light. And eventually, you bring it in light with enough people, you'll have the right emotional reaction to it, to where you're not going to want it anymore. You're going to want the life that God has put in you. Why? Because that is growing. And as it grows, it enables you to win. All right, so then the new life that Jesus is the one that feeds sin in our lives. He does it by putting in a new light and new life in us, and so we put light on our lives. And the second thing we do is we feed it, right? If you want to defeat sin, try to get closer to Jesus. We do that with prayer, worship, we read scriptures. And as we nurture the life in our light, the weeds and the wrong things, they lose their energy. They lose their interest. They lose their strength. They lose their resistance. And eventually it loses its power over us. Thomas Chalmers, an old Puritan, called this the expulsive power of a new affection. I'll give you a little, just to show how this might work. Let's just imagine later today somebody knocks on your door and they say, hey, we're from the U.S. Olympic Committee, and we've been doing a research study of all of Americans saying, because we have your DNA. That's not true. They don't. I don't think they do. But we've looked at your DNA, and we've realized that your DNA matches the perfect profile for winning to have the athletic ability to win in the U.S. Olympic decathlon for your age group. And we want to invite you to come to the Olympic Training Center to train for that. Now, if that's the case, if they come to you and say this is the case, you wouldn't say, well, okay, let me do this. I've got this habit of eating Cheez-Its and ice cream all the time. I'm going to stay home and I'm going to beat that habit. Once I beat the habit of eating my Cheez-Its and ice cream all the time, then I'll come join you at the U.S. Olympic training facility. You wouldn't do that, right? Because chances are, if you stay at home and just keep eating, you'll probably just keep, you don't focus on the Cheez-Its and the ice cream. You begin focusing on the training. It works out with the passage, right? Because they give you a new identity as to who you are. You realize that you actually have, we have a spiritual identity in Jesus. We have his DNA. And what we are, who knows what it could be? We have a new destiny, right? At that point, you just need to stay on the path and begin training for it. You don't focus in on the Cheez-Its and the ice cream. You focus in on the goal. You focus in on who we can be. And then over time, what ends up happening is you don't believe you could. If somebody came and told me that I would never believe that I could win the decathlon for my age group. But if I started training and I started practicing and I got far enough away from the cheeses and the ice cream, sometimes sermons are just little places where pastors confess their stuff, right? If I got away from the cheeses and the ice cream long enough, right, I would develop the confidence to believe that I can be that person. Over time, you and I, we can grow our spiritual confidence to grow up and to show up to the messy places of life, to show up into the messy conversations, to show up in the difficult situations and offer what? The fruit of Jesus' Spirit in our lives. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, goodness, and self-control. Let's pray.